seen from the air, perfectly still. On the morning of December 7th, 1941, the American Pacific Fleet sits tightly moored in the harbor, reflecting a base operating at a peacetime pace. On the decks, American sailors in white uniforms gather for their daily routines. There is no sense of an impending threat. The atmosphere is one of complete normalcy and routine. This quiet morning on the naval base mirrored America's broader geopolitical stance. At this moment, the United States remained at peace, geographically isolated and intent on staying out of the global conflict already consuming much of Europe and Asia. Far above the Pacific, cutting through thick clouds, dozens of Japanese fighter planes are flying in absolute secrecy toward the Hawaiian Islands. This flight was driven by Japan's aggressive imperial expansion. As shown in this photograph of soldiers capturing territory, Japanese leaders were determined to gain total control over China and the resources of Southeast Asia. The United States opposed this expansion with strict embargoes. This map illustrates the U.S. severing vital supply lines, cutting off the steel and oil Japan required. Without these imports, Japan's oil reserves plummeted, creating an existential crisis that threatened to stall their empire. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, pictured here in his formal uniform, devised a high-stakes strategy to break this deadlock. His plan centered on a preemptive strike to destroy the U.S. Pacific Fleet in a single blow. If the American Navy were crippled, Japan could continue its expansion across Asia without facing a major naval resistance. The planes now descending on Hawaii represent the calculated result of this resource war, bringing an end to the American illusion of safety. At 8 a.m., the first wave of Japanese bombers strikes the unsuspecting base. The harbor is rapidly transformed into a scene of chaos. Bombs rain down on the moored vessels, and several battleships are engulfed in flames within minutes. This photograph captures the destruction of the USS Arizona. A massive explosion aboard the ship killed hundreds of sailors, leaving the harbor in ruins. The devastation continued as a second wave of aircraft arrived to finish the job, targeting the ships and infrastructure that had survived the initial strike. After just a few hours of bombardment, the once proud naval base was reduced to a landscape of smoke and wreckage. On a tactical level, Yamamoto's plan achieved its goal. The American Pacific Fleet sat crippled in the water, seemingly removing the primary obstacle to Japan's regional dominance. As the smoke cleared, the human cost was revealed. Over 2,400 Americans were killed, with thousands more wounded. Initially, Japanese leaders celebrated the attack as a victory, believing the display of force would intimidate the United States and discourage further interference in the Pacific. The attack galvanized the American people, overriding previous internal debates about neutrality and shifting the national focus toward mobilization. The following day, President Franklin D. Roosevelt addressed Congress, describing the assault as a date which will live in infamy, and he formally declared war on the Empire of Japan. Within days, Germany and Italy declared war on the United States. The localized conflict in the Pacific had evolved into a total world war. America's response centered on its massive industrial capacity. Peacetime factories, like the one shown here, were immediately converted to produce military aircraft. This shipyard illustrates the scale of the effort. Thousands of aircraft, tanks, and warships began rolling off production lines, creating a surge of material that would redefine the scope of the war. Japan's attempt to secure an empire in a single morning triggered an industrial mobilization that would eventually provide the Allied forces with a decisive material advantage, forever altering the trajectory of world history.